Thank you very much for the introduction, and thanks for having me here this afternoon. So today I'm going to focus on a trial that's ongoing that's looking at reducing dose concentration and using single sire matings. So this is being done in collaboration with Holden Farms here in Minnesota, as well as the University of Alberta, the Swine Reproduction Development Program. So the first couple of slides are going to be a little bit of background and kind of the motive behind wanting to do a trial like this. So first, if we look at it very simplistically, the goal of a production system, a commercial production system, is to increase the pounds of pork that we produce in a cost-effective manner. At the end of the day, creating more value and improving our bottom line. So I think the next question then is, how do we create more value per pig? So the simple answer to that is to use genetically superior animals. So we know that boars that are high indexing, for example, are superior to their counterparts. So they produce progeny that are better in feed conversion, take fewer days to get to market, as well as have decreased mortality in the wean to finish systems. So that boar then passes those traits on to his progeny, and at the end of the day, we're creating more money per pig for the producer's pocket. So what have we done in the last 10 years in terms of improvements? Well, at the sow farm, I think arguably we could say that we spent a lot of time there in terms of improvements, looking at gilt development and management. We've taken a hard look at the way that we develop those gilts and what kind of body condition they're in and what age that we breed. What age and weight that we breed those animals when they go into the sow farm. Secondly, looking at lactation and gestation feeding strategies, and that goes hand in hand with managing sow body condition. Fourthly, looking at length of lactation that's changed over the years. And then lastly, understanding that we have to put the right people in place to make improvements on our sow farms. On the other hand, then, if we look at the boar stud, I think it's fair to say that most studs have seen improvement in the accuracy of their semen concentration in terms of the doses that they produce. Secondly, we've done a better job of assessing sperm in terms of motility and morphology, and through the use of some technical things in the boar stud. And then lastly, I think that we do have more confidence in our boar studs. At the same time, though, we haven't seen a reduction in semen concentration or improved utilization of boars in our boar studs. So that's been relatively the same the past 10 years. So I think as we look around the world and as we travel to different countries, specifically European countries, most systems are using 2 billion total per dose in their systems, and I get the question, why are we still at 3 billion or higher? And I think it's something that we have to prove to ourselves in our production systems, that we can use semen concentration at lower than what we currently are. But the primary reason really to reduce semen concentration is genetics. So we can use boars that are use fewer boars that are higher indexing, increase the value of our progeny, because those progeny will do better in the traits that I described previously. We can reduce the genetic lag and take advantage of genomics by implementing a lower semen concentration. So I want to talk about a trial that's ongoing, that's been going on for the last year. So this trial looked at reducing semen concentration using single sire matings for sire line boars. So in order to improve the use of genetically superior boars in this commercial production system. So just to give you a little bit of background then, so the boars started on trial as they entered the boar stud. So these are boars that were coming out of isolation into one boar stud. So when they came into the stud, as soon as they were collected, their ejaculates were processed at 2 billion viable, and they started on trial. Each boar had to get around 50 single sire matings for the trial, and then after he had his 50 single sire matings, he was pooled with other boars until we got production results back from him. So we did use 2 different sow farms. We used sows with a wean to estrus interval of day 3 to 6, multipara sows. We did not include gilts in this trial. And then I want to make sure that everybody realizes we are using conventional conventional AI at 2 billion. So some of the talks on Saturday talked about using 2 billion, but they were using IUI. So I want to make sure that we are using conventional with 2 billion here. So data was collected for pregnancy rates, fairing rates, and litter size, and then all the semen quality data that you collect normally in a boar stud. So there are actually 3 phases of this trial. So the phase that I'm going to talk about is single sire matings with 2 billion viable cells. The next step potentially of this trial is to do 1.5 billion IUI, and then finally a single fixed timed AI with 1.5 billion. So the results that I'm going to present today are from the first 5 groups of boars. So there are more groups than that are on trial, but these 5 groups have data for fairing rate and litter size both. Okay, so this is our first results slide, and we've got the percentage of sows on the left-hand side, and then boars 1 through 51. So if we look at this graph, then we'll see that there is variation in pregnancy rates and fairing rates. The average pregnancy rate was almost 94% for this group of boars, and the average fairing rate was 92%. Okay, so we have some boars that are outliers in terms of pregnancy rates and fairing rates. So anyway, we do have some boars, such as this boar here that's at a 68 or 64% fairing rate, and a couple other boars that are outliers in terms of pregnancy rates and fairing rates. Okay, then the next slide then looks at results in terms of total born and born alive. So we've got a number of pigs, and then once again boars 1 through 51 on the bottom. So the average total born for this group of boars is a little over 13, and the average born alive is almost 12. Once again, we have boars that are outliers in terms of litter size, so between 9 and 10 born alive. So then if we put these data together in terms of pregnancy rates, fairing rates, and litter size in order to look at the boars and all those parameters, we'll see that this first boar here, although he had the lowest fairing rate, was actually above average in terms of litter size. Whereas these other 2 boars here had low litter size as well as low fairing rate and pregnancy rate. And then we have 2 other boars that have somewhat low litter size, but their pregnancy rates and fairing rates were actually above average. So we know that there's a high correlation between pregnancy rate and fairing rate, but that's not necessarily the case when we look at pregnancy rate, fairing rate, and litter size. So then if we look at EBV and fertility, so these are sire line boars, so they're not selected on any reproductive traits. So we don't expect there to be a correlation necessarily between EBV and fertility. So we've got EBV on this axis, and then the boars listed here, and these are in order of lowest EBV to highest EBV. And then we've got the fecundity index, so 100 sows times fairing rate times born alive. So I just wanted to show this slide because, yes, we have some boars that are lower in EBV and higher in terms of fertility, but we also have boars. This boar here doesn't have the lowest or the highest EBV, but is really well in terms of fertility. So there's not necessarily a relationship there, and I just wanted to show that. The next slide then I think is probably one of the most important slides in terms of the value of the progeny that are produced. So this looks at fecundity index once again as on the other slide, and the boars are arranged from lowest to highest, and then the value of the pigs produced. So when we calculate the value of the pigs produced, we're looking at the EBV of the boar, the value per index point, and the pigs produced. So when we look at this, we can see that just because a boar produces the highest number of progeny doesn't mean that the value of those pigs will be the highest. So for example, this boar here, if you divide this graph in 2, he's in the lower half in terms of production of pigs, but his EBV is driving the value of the pigs produced. So his pigs are worth more than this guy's pigs, even though he has a few more pigs than that boar. So it's important to not only look at the fertility of these boars, but also their EBV. So what are the implications for this trial? Well, there is variation in boar fertility, and we know that. And I think this helps us identify those boars with poor fertility and potentially remove them from the system. The performance of these boars, was no different in terms of farrowing rate, pregnancy rate, and litter size compared with the two farms before we started the trial. And then when we're considering removing boars, we not only need to look at their fertility, but also the index of those boars and what they're contributing down the line. I think it's easy to say that we can use boars at 2 billion cells per dose and be just as successful. And when we do that, once again, we can use fewer boars to make sure that we're using those high indexing boars better. And I think this trial was done on sire lines, but there's no reason why we can't do this also on maternal lines and take advantage of those maternal line boars as well. So I want to go over real quickly the genetic value and how we calculate that as a genetics company. And so this is the sire line model. So this might be a little bit different depending on what genetics you're working with. But we've got, when we define our categories here, we've got the top 50% of boars are AI boars, and the top 25% are what we call CBV plus. So those are just your higher indexing boars. And the value between an AI sired pig and a CBV plus sired pig ranges from $1.30 to $1.70. So keep that in mind as we go through the model and understand that's additive to what I'm going to show you. So if we look at our sire line model, so if we sell the top 50% of boars to customers, so we've got AI boars with a bottom index of 100, and the average index is 107. Our top end boars then have an average index of 126, and we have a difference of about 19 index points for those boars. So if we reduce our semen concentration from 3 to 2 billion, that reduces the number of boars that we need by 33%. So of the AI boars available, we only need 30% of those boars. Half will be AI and half will be our top indexing boars. So then this is the model then at 2 billion. So we can see that we have that shift from 100 to 108 being our cutoff and index. And so the average then index is 113, whereas the average index for the high category boars is 129, with a difference of 16 index points. So on average, the AI boars improved by 6 index points, whereas the CBV plus boars improved by 3 index points. So if we look at the change in traits then, in terms of feed conversion, days to market, back fat loin depth, and then mortality, if we look at the change when we decrease our semen concentration and we're decreasing the number of boars that we're using, the value then per pig for AI boars is around 50 cents and around 30 cents for the CBV plus sired pigs. So what happens then if we make a further reduction to 1 billion per dose? So we're decreasing the boars we need by 67%, and so now we only need 17% of the boars available in our population. So once again, if we look at this model, the base changes from 108 to 119 with the average index of 122. And then the base changes to 128 for an average index of 136 for the CBV plus boars, with a difference of 14 index points. So then the average index for those AI boars changes by 9 points, and the average index for the CBV plus boars changes by 7 points. So if we reduce to 1 billion then, from 2 to 1 billion, that value per AI sired pig is 78 cents, and the value for CBV plus sired pig is 60 cents. So if we add those together then, we're looking between 90 cents and $1.30 per pig by reducing semen concentration and using boars with higher indexes. But in order for this to be realized long term, more than one producer needs to adapt this strategy in reducing semen concentration. Otherwise, we'll see a short-term value realized. So what are the future implications then? Well, the boars that are being sold by, fewer boars will be sold by suppliers because the demand is less. But the improvement will be short-term unless the strategy is adopted by all producers. So in order for our index improvements to occur, our selection intensity has to improve significantly. So even though we're going to sell fewer boars as a genetics company, we have to maintain the same sow base in order to improve selection intensity. So really the key message then from the trial and looking at the genetic model is that we need to strategically use genetically superior boars better. In order to do that, we need to reduce our semen concentration reduce the number of boars that we need in our system. That improves the genetic index, and at the end of the day, that increases the value per pig that we're producing.